Welcome to Guns 101, our video welcome message for new gun owners, brought to you by the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm Rob Morse from Self-Defense Gun Stories. My partners are Amanda Suffolk from Eye on the Target Radio, and the guy behind the curtain doing the heavy lifting, that's Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society podcast. We're fortunate to have Brian Hill with us again. He's from the Complete Combatant and one of my instructors. Brian, millions of people have a gun in the home for the first time. This may be their first experience other than what they saw on Hollywood, which is not good experience. Shooters know where this finger belongs. There's so much that these new gun owners have to learn until we can get them into one of your classes. How can we keep them safe?
You know, as instructors, we know how good somebody is with a firearm from the second they pick it up, because we see where their finger is. We know exactly where their finger is. And if I were to pick up a gun, my finger should be in this place. We have a special term for this. We call it high register, which is a fancy way for saying it should be as far away from the trigger that activates the gun as possible. Now, this is a plastic gun that doesn't work. But what happens is people think they shouldn't be on the trigger, so they put it out here. We know that if you grab something with the other hand, that both hands tend to flex. And that's what happens. If you fall, that finger goes there. So I want to put this finger in a very safe place, so it's far away. So if anything were to happen, it doesn't go to that thing, to the trigger. But the rule is we need to have our sights on the target, but we also need to be thinking about if we're ready to shoot or not. What happens with a lot of people when they first do this is they get the idea of keeping their finger away from the trigger, and they line the gun up. So everything's lined up here. They do all the aiming, and then they quickly move their finger to the trigger and try to shoot. So now everything's messed up. So if my sights are on the target and I've made the decision to shoot, then my finger will come to the trigger. So if I was shooting at the range, or I'm practicing at home with a training aid like this that doesn't have bullets, or I dry practice with nothing in the gun and it's safe, what I'm going to practice is if the gun comes out and I'm lining up the sights right now with the TV, so as I come forward, my finger begins to move because I've made that decision. Now everything's resting. I'm going to clean up the front, which we call a sight picture, or as Gabe White calls it, a sight movie, which I think is a better way to think about it.
Yeah.
Movies have action. It's going to be moving the whole time. So the decision is now chained to, am I shooting in a safe direction, or I'm shooting at something that I intend to? Now my finger needs to move there as the sights become in line with the target. That's an important process, and it's often missed. I get some of the best shooters in the world in my class, and what I'll see them do is take the gun, hold it, do a lot of aiming, and then move their finger and start all over again, which creates a very slow process. Let's think about it. If we're going to shoot and we're going to see where we're shooting, then the finger should move to that. If you were to point a gun in an unsafe direction, but you were to keep your finger off the trigger, there's no accident. You're safe right then, right? If you pointed the gun in a safe direction, but your finger was on the trigger, and you have an unintentional discharge, which is a term I like to use, because what that means is you did not intend to shoot the gun. It was not a conscious thought. Sometimes we say negligent, but in law terms, that means something a little different. That maybe you were trying to do it on purpose or trying to cause harm to a certain extent. Unintentional means that you did not intend to shoot, and it covers a broad range of things. We've seen shooters, get on the trigger too fast and shoot in a direction towards the target, but not really mean it. That's an unintentional discharge still, and then not putting your finger on the trigger is also, we want to be safe with that. How does that finger work? This takes a lot of practice. This is the hardest thing, I think, in all of it, because we've got lining up the gun and moving the finger, and then we have to gently press this to the rear, and it needs to be in continuous motion so that we get a good, I'm going to do this just clicks. I want to keep moving. All right. Now I'm not going to shoot, then my finger needs to come off. If my sights are not on the target, my finger needs to come off. So if I was aiming at something here and I move the gun off, that finger comes up. If I'm going to shoot, finger comes back. That's something that you can practice. It doesn't cost any money. You can do it at home, and you can simply practice in a safe direction with either a plastic gun or your gun with no ammo in it, of what would you aim at? I have targets on the wall behind me that I practice with in a safe direction. And what I do is I put up one target that I wouldn't shoot and one target that I would, and I move back and forth between them. And what I do is practice putting that finger on and off, on and off, on and off. I teach a lot of force on force, and that's a special term, new gun owners, which means there's a safe area where all the firearms are inert like this. They don't actually work, and we can actually practice against each other. And what I see is when people get nervous is the finger comes to the trigger to check if it's there constantly. So I think as hard as muzzle discipline is, trigger finger discipline is equally difficult, and it has to be practiced as an on and off again switch. If I'm going to shoot, it's on. If I'm not doing any shooting, it's off, and that's it. And the highest level shooters, especially, I do a lot of precision long range shooting. You see guys with tremendous amount of doing it because they're carrying very light triggers in those guns. They have to be very careful with it. So for you new gun owners, just practice that finger on, finger off, and the decision. I am going to shoot, so my finger should go to the trigger. If I'm not going to shoot, my finger should come off the trigger. And
I think do this. So when I was watching the video, part of you pulled the gun up and you did the smooth motion from your finger off the side of the gun down onto the trigger, and then a smooth trigger press. People are told pull the trigger, and it's not really it's not a pull the trigger, it's a press the trigger. It's a smooth motion. It's not like flipping a light switch. And I think that that's a portion that needs to be explained a little to new shooters, because I think that we as experienced shooters miss that in the explanation.
So when you first start working with this, one of the big things is you're going to have a big explosion, and you tend to duck and close your eyes, and then your hand tends to clench. So you don't get to see any of it. You don't get to feel any of it. You're like, well, it went that way. It didn't go where I wanted it to. So something that we have a lot of control over is how we work this. And what we want to do is we want to think of it as a canoe. We keep paddling. All right. If you only paddle and stop, the canoe goes all different directions. So when you begin to press the trigger, what you do is you just keep it moving, and it'll move to the back.
Move it up a little bit. You're a little low. That's better.
Just like that. So I don't go like this and do it real quick. I just press it to the rear and keep it moving. Press it to the rear and keep it moving. And then I let it reset as the gun's shooting. I let it reset. I get ready to do it again, and I press it to the rear. Tom Givens has a good thing that he says, there's 3 trigger speeds. There's quickly, carefully, and precisely. I found most people only have 1 trigger speed. If you're an accuracy first shooter, it's precisely. And if you're a speed shooter, it's quickly. But what you do is you get engaged in feeling how this motion feels right here. What is my finger doing, and how does it move? And how does it relate to what is happening at the front of the gun? That gives you that kinesthetic feedback. And what I want you to do is be incredibly interested in what's happening. Instead of worried about what will happen in the future, or worried about the shot you just missed, I want you to be in complete control of the now, and I want you to be so incredibly concerned about the only thing that you can control is pressing that trigger and keeping the sights not still, but in an acceptable wobble zone in front of that target, because we move, we're human beings, and just press it to the rear, get kinesthetically aware, get visually aware, and enjoy the process of shooting, and instantly you will improve your shooting, and your mind will have something to pay attention to instead of apprehension of the future.
Well, that makes so much sense. So, folks, you're listening to Brian Hill from thecompletecombatant.com. He's been doing some Guns 101 videos, so there's several more for you to look up. So if this is the first one you found, go find the others too.